Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, I feel quite challenged, and that is part of the challenge. You guys are tired. I just arrived this morning, but I heard you had a great party yesterday, and I must say I can see it. It's quite warm in the room as well, and I'm the last speaker between you and the coffee break, even if we have this little discussion later on. So, a challenge. Plus, I will not have many fancy tools here. Most of the innovation that I talk about has not an I in front. I'm a little bit inspired and relieved by the presentation of James, because James basically said not all innovation has to be about IT technology. I would go even beyond for comms and say not every innovation has to be about technology. I have a very simple thought I want to put forward, and in order to do so, unfortunately, I have to put you on the meta level of comms. And the thought is, despite the fact that we as a discipline have very much eyed the marketing folks in the last decade or so, in terms of where is the potential for innovation for our discipline, it might be worthwhile to look more into the sustainability and responsibility direction in order to find out about new tricks, new ways of working with the public in order to generate reputation. I've been asked to keep the advertising block very short, and I will do so, but you have to know a few words about our company in order to understand my approach. We are the leading logistics company of the world. We have roughly 450,000 employees in more than 220 countries and territories. That's more than the United Nations has member states and the Catholic Church member churches. So we're pretty much everywhere, actually, with local operations. We move about 5% of world trade every day. We apply a strategic approach, which is not news to you, I'm sure, because most of the companies have arrived at that level by now, which is a multiple bottom line approach in which corporate responsibility, apart from the customer, the employee, and the financial market, plays a role in itself. Just to mention one concrete example, we have a KPI related to our CO2 emission, which is locked and filed in the year of 2007, and we have put the task in front of us to reduce that carbon footprint by 30% until the year 2020. The strategic plan for sustainability goes even further. Again, not big news for you, I'm sure. We differentiate between the classical corporate citizenship part of the job, where we address societal needs by leveraging our specific company skills in order to do good for society and talk about it. A shared value approach by which we even go further and develop products which in itself rebalance between the willingness and need of the company to earn money and the interest of the society to find solutions, and the customer to find solutions for burning issues the customer might have in the surrounding of its own activities towards the public. Specifically, I should mention here our Go Green products, which reduce the carbon footprint of our delivery services. And the last element, again, nothing new, I'm sure, we call it responsible business practice, doing our business in the way that ethical and legal standards are met. Take a breath and now think about communication first. First of all, I have to say, and we heard a lot about that actually in the first presentations of this morning, we're moving, and actually business is the last societal segment to do so. We're moving in the age of post-modernity. And you see that along the lines of 4 specific developments, which all have been touched upon already in the presentations we heard from James and Julia specifically. The first one is the next stage of globalization. Third stage of globalization means it's no longer us going to other markets and sell our goods. It's not even us going to other markets and produce there in order to have a shorter way to the demand. It's now the markets where we have sold our goods in the past coming to us. In the last 5 years, the numbers of Chinese companies on the Fortune 500 list has tripled, and it will go on like that. And China is just the first country, Asia the first region, to be on that stage of development. Sustainability in itself, a mega trend that changes the way of working. It's no longer about what you produce, it's about how you do it. It's about moving from out-competing your other players in the market to out-behaving them. Digitization, I just mentioned the word, everything has been said about that. And with digitization and the ability to have the single demand being separated from monopolized media channels comes fragmentation. Fragmentation of customer demand, fragmentation of societal structures. And that creates for the communicators, and I gather most of the people here in the room, including myself, sit regularly in front of their CEO and are asked what to do comms-wise. And we are confronted with the complexity, the hyper-transparency, the volatility that comes with the trends I talked about moving our business into postmodernity. And so far, at least, we meet those challenges with the old paradigm. And I call it the old paradigm of corporate communications, despite the fact that I'm perfectly sure we all use the nice new tools, we all have state-of-the-art technology and concepts and strategy applied, but the basic logic is old paradigm. The logic is we are communicating from the inside to the outside. We create reason to believe in the relevance of what we do and the credibility of how we act and the thought leadership that we are able to apply beyond the market leadership of our company. And that means we all here in this room, we are in reputation business. And I believe, and that's what I tried to convey with my short introduction, there's a way to move that paradigm into a new area when we look to how corporate responsibility / sustainability work is done. And in order to tell you how far the step might be, I want to use an example from art. There's a great exhibition going on at the moment in Bonn, the place where my company is located, about Russian avant-garde. It focuses on Kazimir Malevich, who in the Russian avant-garde, which was the most spikiest of all avant-gardes, was the most spikiest guy. This is how he started off. And this is how we are today as comms people. We do state-of-the-art stuff. It's a little bit impressionistic already. It was modern at the time when it was painted in 1904. It's early work called Spring Garden. I come back to other work of Malevich in the course of my presentation in order to inspire you about the step you might have to move forward in reaching the next level of our communication abilities. I was nudged into that situation because sometime in mid of 2012, I was sitting in front of my CEO, Frank Appel, and Frank said, you know what, some people tell me I should combine communications and responsibility. There were distinct functions until then, corporate communications and corporate responsibility. The guy who did corporate responsibility took over a different job, and someone told Frank, why don't you integrate them? Frank being a McKinsey guy by training, now running our company since almost 10 years, is always looking for options to organize a more streamlined function, so he was inclined to think about it. And he was looking at me and said, well, I thought about it, you know what, I think it's a shit idea. Because I'm going to put our nice corporate responsibility activities into the hands of the comms guy, and people will think I just give you the opportunity to create more silver bullet ammunition for communications work. And I took all my efforts to explain him this is a huge opportunity. If we do not go on and put just the two functions side by side as pillars which work independently as silos, but if we create a learning experience between the comms and the responsibility people, and if we start to move towards a new governing idea, which is mentioned here, joint stakeholder integrated strategy and joint stakeholder relations work, and at the same time, the attempt to use the skills of the comms and the responsibility folks in order to make a direct contribution to the business success of the company. I took the idea back to my team and we thought, and I mean, even to have the comms and I call them the co and the re people, because it's comms and responsibility, to have the co and the re people in one room was interesting, because there was so much prejudices. The comms people thought the responsibility folks are the tree huggers, no idea about reality, always very much excited about their idea, but impossible to be communicated. And the re people thought the comms guys are just cynical assholes. They just take for granted what they can see written in a newspaper, and they're not really up to delivering against a higher good or to things that go beyond the sheer effect of having good press. Still, I kind of forced them into a dialogue, and we came up with the joint observation, actually it's a yin and yang here, because we bring two different key resources to the table that a successful company needs in order to do comms in the 21st century. One is to exert influence in terms of reputation, in terms of concrete contribution to business success, and the other one is empathy, in terms of proximity towards our stakeholders. And we further detailed that even and tried to allocate different activities which now in the integrated team existed to the different equations. And we realized it's not even that only the comms people have the influence side and only the responsibility colleagues are on the empathy side. It's actually a mix of both. And we, from that point on, got away from the distinction of the two functions and started to fully integrate. It changed our business model. The new paradigm of corporate communications and responsibility, as I would call it, is integrated stakeholder engagement business. It has on one side surely the focus on reputation, and we do the classical stuff that comms people do in order to drive it, in order to measure it, in order to put concrete activity against it. But we have on the other side the shared value-oriented approach, which is about finding a new balance between what the company wants to achieve with its products in terms of profitability, safeguarding jobs, and so on, and what society is expecting from us. So when relevance, credibility, and thought leadership were the focus topics in the past, now it's combined with dialogue tools, stakeholder engagement activities, and sustainable solutions which are driven out of my team. Well, it reads very nicely and it basically makes sense. For my people, and maybe even for some of you, it looked like that. And this is Malevich in the high days of what he called suprematism. A red square where in the past were landscapes and houses. And it describes a little bit how puzzled people in the beginning were when they had to start to work in this new setup. The good news is, and I'm going to come to that when I arrive at the end of my presentation, even in terms of the Malevich presentation, this is not the end, and we're going to see a rebalancing of the old and the total new in the future. So where are we on our journey, and what basically happened in terms of the, let's say, the key parameters of how we do our job in terms of what is our aim, what is our focus, what is our approach. And after that slide, actually, I show you two concrete examples of what we did in order to live that integration also very practically. First of all, yes, we started to integrate in 2012, or the decision was made, but it took us a whole year, 2013, to organize the integration, to reshuffle the function, to move things from one department to the other and make sure it's not two distinct teams, but a really combined team. And I can only say that in 2014 now we are working in a fully integrated approach. It meant even in the language we talk with each other that things have changed. When in the past, the communications community, where I come from, concentrated on the significance of an event, the news value of something that a company does, and applied what I call a mass media logic to it by putting it on paid or earned platforms. It's now that relevance is much more of importance and materiality, and that's something that the comms people have learned from the RE people. It's not so important that something creates a news value short term because it is important from our perspective and we use all of our magic to push it into the media. Sustainably successful will communication be if it has a relevance which is proven in the materiality of the very activity or the very position of the company. Materiality, those who are familiar with responsibility activities of companies being something that in sustainability is measured regularly by matching the internal agenda of the company with the external expectations of the stakeholders by means of social surveying. You even have to publish that in your CR report. We do that, and it has changed the view of the communicators on the relevance of what actually has to be communicated dramatically. In terms of the approach, and believe me or not, if you would have told me 3 or 4 years ago that I would stay in front of a comms crowd and say strategic planning is not enough, I would have told you this can't be true, because this always was my edge. I believe very much in strategic planning, and the success we had in comms in the past few years is very much related to the fact that we had a plan. But I've learned, given focusing on relevance and materiality, that strategic planning is not enough. You have to live in the here and now and kind of adapt yourself to the nowism, as they call it, of the responsibility topics, which needs time and again to go away from the plan and do what is technically necessary. And you have to have the resources and structures to apply that flexibility. We have moved from reaching target groups to dialogue with stakeholders. We even use the notion target groups very rarely in the meantime, because just in very few cases you have a target where you can deliver a certain message and then you run away. It ends up always in a dialogue, and you have to think about what comes back out of that communication when you start off. And the intensification of the digital activities from having bridgeheads into a full-fledged digital approach goes without saying, because this is what allows you to be in interaction with your stakeholders. Now, very briefly, the two examples. We have integrated actually our regular media digest, short-term and long-term, the issues monitoring that we do, and the materiality analysis I spoke about into one set of data. Not yet that you would call it big data mining or a full 360 approach, but we're getting close to it. We use that data that we generate in the agenda to match it against external and internal expectations in expert groups displayed. We have an internal responsible business practice council that gives advice, and an external sustainability advisory council that gives advice. And then we refine the agenda in a kind of never-ending cyclical process, and at the end it influences again which topics we drive strategically on the communication side, and how this is supported by additional activities on the corporate responsibility side. And the second example, we have cultivated what we call our Delivering Tomorrow brand. We are a delivering company, not a publisher, but we've published in the meantime 3 books. A 4th one is to come this fall, which concentrate on stakeholder relevant questions and which are designed in order to open up a dialogue, also about topics in which we are not doing well yet. So we open up actually the face shield and get in very often also critical discussion, and we do it on the basis of a gift of content. We do to relevant societal discourse. Interestingly enough, the newest book will be about stakeholder engagement and dialogue, and will be published at the end of this year. It brings us in touch with the CR community, with industry decision makers, journalists and the public, and the political arena, and thus is kind of a communications tool that caters the exchange which I was talking about. Proof to the pudding, just 2 small examples. One is we have strong competition internationally, specifically in the US for sure, because there are 2 big companies who own that market. And we are very close to each other if it comes to the awareness of the brands, but we've been able to win a competitive edge in terms of who of the 3 stands for a societal contribution, which is quite significant in the meantime. And that is related to the fact that we have combined the communication skills with the materiality of our sustainability activities. And the second point, we've also been able to use the content that comes from the sustainability management to further excel in the media relations arena. So it's not a burden, it's actually a great opportunity. Will it change everything forever? And does it mean, the way I describe it, that you have to throw up all dices and you might end up in a totally new world? No, it will happen what happened with Malevich. This is late work from Malevich, a very traditional painting, or a very traditional subject, I should say. It's a female worker, but you see the idea of the suprematism embedded in the traditional way of working. And this is what will happen to you. We're going to stay comms people, and the comms logic is the overriding principle that will apply for us. But we can learn big tricks and new opportunities by innovating and using the way of working of the corporate responsibility and sustainability functions. Thank you very much.